everybody, and we are live. It is Wednesday. It is the 7th of December. I can't believe it. We are in December, and it's not that long until Christmas, till the end of the year. The party mood is beginning to start. How exciting. What a great time of year it is. I expect some of you got your advent calendars out there and you're busy having your chocolate every day. I tell you, I look at mine and I think we're about 3 days away from Christmas at the moment. Maybe that's just me and chocolate. Anyway, we are live. We've got a great show for you. It's that time of year. As one year ends and we start the next year, we start to think about the global outlook. So what's going on? What is the global outlook for next year? We've got people coming in from around the world. So we've got people coming in from Connecticut. We've got Emily from France. We've got people from all over. We've got Mena all the way from Egypt. You know how it works, everybody. Join the conversation, write in the comments box. Let us know your views. And it's especially important we get your views today because we're talking about the global outlook for 2023. Now, none of us know what 23 is going to hold, but we've all got our own views and our own perceptions. And let's just share those between ourselves, share our views as to what is going to happen next year. It's just, you know, it's that time of year. So that is the show today. And then next year, now I'm really excited about this. Next week, we've got the big reveal. That's the big show next week when we're going to be letting you know who have been voted the top 100 innovators in global mobility for the current year. And we've got innovators in all sorts of different areas of mobility. We've got people who've been innovative in policy design, in program implementation, in vendor selection. We've got people who've been innovative in what they've done with LGBTQ+. We've got people who've been innovative on other areas of diversity, innovative with technology, all sorts of fascinating areas. And we're going to be celebrating success. So it may well be that you're one of them. So make sure whatever you do, you watch the show next week to find out who has made the top 100 list. More on that later. The other thing, of course, you get from joining this show is you get the ability to get your CPE credits. So whether you want your CPE credits from ERC, the GMS, or the CRP credits, there they are. And many thanks to Lynn Shotwell and her team at ERC, or whether you want your HRCI or your SHRM credits, and many thanks there to our friends from Rocket Mortgage, who in fact will be on the show in a moment. Our friends from Rocket Mortgage, we've got Mike Kluge and Kyle Symoniak sitting in our green room. So a lot of exciting things going on. But apart from all that, we always like to have a little bit of breaking news. What's been happening in the last 7 days in this wonderful industry that we all love so much and we're working. So let's have a look. What's been the news in the last 7 days? So lots of exciting news in the last 7 days. Congratulations to everyone who's joined, got new jobs or been promoted, got their qualification like the MBA we saw there. Congratulations to everybody, particularly congratulations to people joining Benevo. I was told the other day that we've actually recruited 30 new people in the last 3 months alone, which is just extraordinary. Big shout out to Altavita, to Carolina and Vivi there on raising $9.5 million in their Series A funding. A great result there, and they ran a great event the other day, the Altos. So congratulations, all that. Congratulations to all our wonderful new change makers. And also, there's lots of good jobs out there. So if you're looking for jobs, do make a note of those jobs that are out there. And we hope to do more on helping people find jobs in the new year. More on that to follow. What I want to do now, of course, is to move on to talk about immigration. We always have a section with the wonderful Julia Onslow Cole. So you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's bring on to stage Julia Onslow Cole.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Julia. So I gather, and I'll just warn the audience, that you're working off a hotspot at the moment. So
I am.
That yes. your internet survives. So Julia, tell us what you're going to be talking to us about today.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of a global visa roundup, because now is coming up to the festive season, and all of the government departments and consulates are experiencing, quite a lot of delays. But it's much worse than normal because it's much worse than normal because of the previous COVID delays. And we're particularly seeing this in Europe and Latin America. And I just wanted to give a big shout out to Sam Carlton and Clayton Pryor for helping me look at every consulate around the world through the nomadic technology we have to get some sort of overview for you. So Pankaj from Benevo actually called this out a couple of weeks ago on the comments about how long it was taking to get interviews to go to the US. And immigrant and non-immigrant, which is the temporary applications, there's extraordinary delays. Some are over a year, and the majority of consulates are now taking 6 months for a tourist or a business traveller. And then normally you do get delays in Italy and the Czech Republic, but now we're seeing for work permits huge delays in Germany, and that's because of the Ukraine crisis. But we do have some sort of tips in a minute, and we do have some brighter spots. And one of them is every Tuesday I speak to my colleague Becky Shear in Shanghai to find out what's going on in China. So I'm well informed for Wednesday for Benevo. And she said that there is some considerably good things that are happening in China, particularly about domestic mobility. So it's not every city, but Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, they've actually done a lot to relax measures on mobility. And we were talking about it with Mike before we came on just now. And he was confirming that that's what they're hearing too. So whereas, before one person in an apartment you would lock down the whole, area of the city, now it's just contained to those few apartments. So that's a really big positive move.
China's moving away a bit from its zero COVID.
Yes, that's great. The other thing that's really exciting is that on Tuesday of this week, yesterday, the 6th of December, the Indian High Commission announced that they're bringing back e-visas for UK nationals for India. So that's huge news. And you'll remember that I did cover India only last week and explained it was quite difficult for people because UK citizens were really struggling for months with delays. Long delays for appointments and high visa fees, and now they can get e-visas. So that's fantastic. So what should you do? What should you do with all these delays? So I think one of the things you can be very clever about is picking the right consulate. So as an example, we had a client who urgently needed to get a Schengen visa to go to the Netherlands, and London was 100% booked. But we actually found some appointments in Edinburgh and got an and got him out almost immediately.
Okay,
now,
so here's
some of the visas
is pick your consulate carefully.
Yes. And some of the visa centres are offering a mobile biometric service, and that's often quite expensive. And it sounds really good, but when you actually do the maths, it's still quicker and much cheaper to actually pick another consulate or another visa office. So that's a thing to just be mindful of. And just ending on a sort of more positive note, because of the World Cup, there have been huge restrictions in Qatar, but they are being lifted now. And certainly for GCC citizens and residents, effectively, immediately, you don't need a ticket to the game to get into Qatar. And if you wanted to go and see any matches, it's much easier now.
So as your team is knocked out, you're able to get in. I mean, they could do it almost a country by country basis. So so Spanish citizens could be allowed in now, but not sort of Moroccans or whatever until they get knocked out in another round. Anyway, many thanks for that thing. I'm loving your Christmas tree in the background there, Julia. Your tiny
very sad. I need to get some tinsel on it.
Absolutely. And thank you for managing off a hotspot. Julie, we really appreciate everything you do for the show. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say a big thank you to Julia Onslow-Cole, and let's welcome onto the stage our resident tax guru, Pat Jurgens. Patrick, my man, how are you?
I'm doing well, Brian. How about yourself?
I'm really good. I'm definitely getting into the Christmas spirit. Now, this, of course, is your last show before Christmas. We're having our last show next week, but we only have tax every other week. So
that's right.
On behalf of the entire industry, can I say thank you for all the amazing work you do, updating people on tax every other week throughout the year, and wish you all the best for a great Christmas break and a wonderful 2023.
Excellent.
So Matt, tell us what's news.
What's news? Well, I wanted to keep with the theme today, so I'll be talking about the tax outlook for 2023. And I think we can draw some broad generalizations as governments and taxpayers respond to inflation and the possibility of recession. It's likely that higher income taxpayers will see tax increases, and there'll be some limited tax relief for offsetting the costs of inflation and energy prices. Clearly, a balancing act as governments consider state budgets and spending. We already talked about just last week or last 2 weeks ago about the UK tax changes with a tax increase for higher incomes and the fiscal drag of not indexing for inflation for at least 4 or 5 years to 2028. And in addition, we're hearing that Ghana wants to also implement a tax increase for higher incomes, increasing their top rate from 30% to 35%. And in an earlier show, I also talked about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has plans to implement some tax hikes only because they have some severe economic problems. And so it'll be interesting to see how that gets enacted. Here at the Airing Tax Department, we're working on the U.S. update for 2023. And for federal purposes, the key takeaway, the notable change is inflation indexing that is required by law. And the largest increase for inflation adjusting in quite some time. They increased all the brackets and the deductions by 7%. California doesn't use the same CPI index, so they used a 8.7% inflation indexing for the California rule. So
this gets state by state, does it? Or is this
yes, exactly. So we'll see a drop in taxes, assuming that your income is unchanged. And we're also seeing some notable tax cuts at the state level. Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, and Iowa made some changes. But here in Massachusetts, voters voted in a millionaire's tax. So there'll be an extra 4% tax due on incomes over $1 million. So that'll be an interesting thing to follow as we look into 2023. We're not expecting much in the way of major tax legislation here in the United States during 2023 or even during this lame duck session. Congress is still divided between Republicans and the Democrats. Republicans are looking for some sort of a business-related tax changes, and maybe there can be a tax bargain struck with the Democrats. They're looking to bring back in the expanded child tax credit. And if you recall, that was in 2021. It included advanced cash payments of the child tax credit. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see that. But that is something that it would be part of the tax outlook for 2023.
Because say the US is moving into gridlock or into
yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
But we can expect some major changes elsewhere here in the United States. The Internal Revenue Service, the IRS got a very large bump in funding, over $80 billion over 10 years to address better taxpayer services, implement new technology, and the dreaded enforcement. So we can expect more tax audits coming from the IRS. And President Biden just nominated a new IRS commissioner. His name is Danny Werfel, and he has extensive experience both at the IRS and at the Office of Management and Budget. So he'll have his hands full during 2023 to figure out how to implement these budget increases. And we can also expect that the Republicans now controlling the House will be investigating the IRS during 2023 as they look to block some of that new funding that was implemented for the IRS. Finally, something we won't be talking about during 2023. One of our most notable U.S. taxpayers is having his tax filings investigated. Donald Trump's tax returns for the last 6 years were just turned over to the House Ways and Means Committee. This was after a Supreme Court order and a 6-year legal battle to keep the tax returns confidential from Congress. But I don't think the public can expect to see much from that committee review of the returns. They don't have much more to conclude their investigation since the Republicans are taking over in January. And I doubt that they'll be looking at Trump's tax returns. But just this week, we also learned that the Trump organization was found guilty on all counts of tax fraud. And it's all about a matter that global mobility tax professionals are all too familiar with: taxable fringe benefits to employees. Yes, employees with housing, cars, covering their personal expenses is what? It's taxable. So the Trump organization is facing penalties up to a maximum of 1.6 million. But like I mentioned, all this stuff about Trump's taxes are likely to be yesterday's news in 2023.
Pat, fascinating. Amazing how something as simple as taxable fringe benefits somehow has become a major political story. But we won't go into that, as you said, because that's probably going to be yesterday's news or last year's news as we move into 23, especially with a new balance of power within the US House. But so what we're going to do is we're now going to move on. We're going to bring onto screen our wonderful producer, Tally, to tell us what's upcoming over the next couple of weeks. Pat, wishing you very merry
happy holidays to you and the team.
Holidays. And everybody, you know how it works. Let's see this screen light up. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say goodbye and Happy New Year to Pat. And let's welcome onto stage Tally.
Hello, Brian.
Hey, so I opened your section with that video all about the top 100 innovators. I know we are so excited about it. So tell us all about top 100, and many thanks to all our partner organizations who've worked with us on this. Tally, tell us all about next week.
So yes, it's only one week before we announce.
7 days we're away from finding out who are the top 100 innovators in the global mobility
Yes,
world.
we're going to have 100 of them. It's going to be really exciting. And as I mentioned before, now we're going to know not only who they are, but why they're on this list. And this is really exciting because we're going to get a lot of really interesting little stories. And we're already planning to invite some of them for a show after our holiday break to tell us why were they chosen to be top 100 innovators. But in the meantime, I also want to tell you that last week we had a fantastic show about the change makers.
It was great. We got so much amazing feedback on that show.
I know. And we actually have quite a few people that joined already. I already welcomed Devika and Alexandra on the breaking news. But we have a few more that already joined since we prepared this video. And that's fantastic. Actually, I saw Devika here. So hi, Devika. And we keep having new discussions as we get more change makers. They bring new ideas for discussions with them, and it's fascinating because, for example, we had one change maker who's now going to have employees going to the Netherlands where she didn't have ones before. So she's consulting with another change maker about how to do that, and we also have plenty of them in a discussion about cost-saving ideas. So that's really exciting what's happening there.
And we're going to do a whole show on cost savings, aren't we?
We will, yes. And we'll probably invite some of our change makers to give us ideas because they do have wonderful ideas. So if anyone here is interested in joining us, you have to be an in-house corporate professional. Also, you have to be passionate about technology, and you really want to influence change in the future of global mobility. And of course, influence change in the world, because we are donating up to $1,000 a year for every change maker that is joining the community. So let us know if you want to join. It's a really fascinating community to be in.
It really is win-win. You get to meet amazing people. You help share your passion for technology, and you and your charities win financially too. So yeah, we're always on the lookout for change makers to join us.
That's Devika. She's not. It's sometimes in privacy definitions you cannot see the names, but I can see that's here. Hi, Devika.
Cool. Okay, so thank you so much, Tally. And again, see you at the end of the show. Let's now move on. We're going to be talking about the economic outlook for 2023. So let's bring on our special guests. I'm super honored. We've got from Rocket Mortgage, we've got Kyle Symoniak, and we've got Mike Kluge. So let's bring them onto the show now. So you know how it works. Hit the heart, hit the like, hit the applause, and let's bring them onto the show.
Hey, Brian.
All the way from Detroit, we have Kyle Symoniak and Mike Kluge from Rocket Mortgage. I am super excited because for those of you inside the US, you may well know Rocket Mortgage. For those of you outside the US, you may not know Rocket Mortgage. So let's find out a little bit. I'll start with you, Mike. Just tell us a bit about yourself, how long you've been with Rocket Mortgage, what your role is, and a bit about the company.
Yeah, sure, Brian. It's great to see you again. Thanks for the opportunity to be on the show. So I currently have been with Rocket Mortgage. We like to refer to things here sometimes in terms of seasons, going on just over 10 seasons at Rocket Mortgage, or years. We like to kind of just loop in our sports analogies. And I currently lead our relocation, business development, and account management teams, as well as our affinity channel, which basically works with corporations that are looking to provide additional incentives or benefits to their employees. We do that in terms of mortgage assistance. So super excited excited to be here again and to be able to have my colleague Kyle join us as well for the show. So thank you.
And Kyle, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for having me as well, Brian. My first time here, but it's fantastic to be invited.
It'll be your last. We'll get you back, Kyle.
I hope so. I'm going to hold you to it, but I'll talk to Mike first, I promise. So I've been here just about 10 years as well. I've been here about 9.5 years. I sit in what we call our capital markets group, and capital markets is a little bit different depending upon what kind of company you are. For us,
yeah. So what is? I mean, for those of us who are ignorant, what is? And hear the term. What is capital markets? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't say ignorant. I would just say maybe you're not a nerd like me, maybe. But you know.
In my case, it's ignorant. I'll own up to that one.
Yeah. So for us here as a mortgage originator, we're not a bank. So we have found that we are incredibly good at talking to clients and helping them secure their homeownership dream. Because we're not a bank, we don't have an unlimited pot of money. So what our capital markets group here does at Rocket Mortgage is, among other things, on my teams, we're responsible for taking all the loans that we make and close to consumers, to our clients. And we work with investors, certainly all over the US and you know, at least in some regard, really all over the world, to take those closed loans and sell them to them as investments, whether we sell the loan itself or we package it up into mortgage-backed securities. What's great about Rocket, and there are absolutely other other folks that do this as well, but certainly we're very proud of it here at Rocket Mortgage. We might sell most of that mortgage off as an investment, but we keep what in the US is called the servicing of that loan. So that means that when you talk to our folks and you get a loan and you close it, you're still going to be talking to folks here with Mike and I in downtown Detroit, Michigan, when you make your payments, as you have questions about taxes or your homeowner's insurance, things like that. We do sell off, and a ton of other folks do, to investors really all around the world. But we keep that servicing here at home, and so folks still get to talk to and feel the brand of Rocket Mortgage every day, which again is just something we're incredibly proud of.
And you guys are not just big; you are massive in the United States. I mean, you were telling me earlier, we were chatting in the green room, I think you said that you originated, not you personally, but you, Rocket, originated last year $350 billion worth of mortgages.
Yeah, that's right. Mike and I certainly didn't originate those ourselves.
In New York.
But yeah, we, like a lot of other mortgage lenders, we certainly had 2 very good years, but yeah, back-to-back years of around 320 and 350 billion in originations, which makes us the largest originator in the U.S.
Wow, I mean that's just mind-boggling. That just the sheer volume of $350 billion of mortgage. I mean,
it is a lot of zeros.
There's a lot of properties out there. So there's a lot of people, probably a lot of people in our audience actually, especially those who are US based, who are thinking, oh, I've got a Rocket Mortgage, what's going to happen to it? And so let's just talk about 2023. That's why we're here. And I'll start with you, Mike, and I'll ask you a question actually that I asked some people on LinkedIn too, but I'll start what's your prediction for next year in terms of move volumes? That's the industry we're all in. We are one way or another in the moving location business, the relocation business, which is all about volumes. So what's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen next year in terms of, and I'll give you 4 choices here, actually. Are we going to see a big increase in moves? Are we going to see a modest increase in moves? Are we going to see a modest decline in moves? Or are we going to feel a big decline in moves? And let's face it, 2022 started as a year of rebound and has ended with, a bit of economic bad news out there: high inflation, high interest rates, layoffs in certain sectors. How's that all going to pan out for next year? Where are we on this sort of, supremely optimistic to incredibly pessimistic scale?
Yeah, for sure. So I have consulted all of my crystal balls. I talked with every one of them. And I think the consensus, what we're hearing, people we're talking to, is we're looking at potentially some modest growth. I think some of the latest statistics I've seen is maybe 3 to 5%. Again, nobody really knows. I think there's so many factors that I know we'll get into that could play into what ultimately happens next year. But I think for the most part, obviously, I think companies are optimistic. Companies are focused on growth. They're focused on their talent. And I don't think that ever changes within the mobility industry. And so I think we are expecting a little bit of modest growth. I don't think we're looking at anything significant. But I also think it's very company specific. There are some companies that will be moving a lot.
Let me just cut in there. I'll come back to
Mhm.
you in a second, Carl. But let me just throw that out to the audience, because there's always like a couple of minute delay whilst we're talking till it goes live on LinkedIn. So out in the audience, Mike is throwing out 3 to 5% as being on balance what he's expecting to see. Okay, are you going to upvote Mike or downvote Mike? Do you think we're going to do more than 3 to 5%? Not you personally, but as an industry in terms of move volume, or do you think Mike is being a bit over optimistic and actually it's going to be somewhere below 3%? So if you're out there in the audience, and I know there's loads of you out there, then let us know, write in the comments box, and we'll try and pick some of those up on screen. Mike, okay, so let's just go back to you. I think you're going to move on and talk about some of the sectoral issues that are going on.
Yeah, I think right now, I mean, what we're experiencing is a lot of conversations with our partners, really just trying to learn about different options. Obviously there's a lot that's happened within the mortgage industry over the past year with rising interest rates and home values. And so it's been an opportune time for us to talk with our partners, just in terms of what options are out there in terms of assistance they can provide from a mortgage perspective. I don't know that companies are necessarily ready to make the decision or pull triggers yet as far as what they want to do. But they certainly want to understand what their options are should they want to provide assistance to their relocating employees to sort of offset some of those rising costs related now to mortgages in the terms of those rising interest rates and home values. And so, it's always interesting within relocation. We always talk about having that bookshelf and, different programs and policies come on and off the shelf and collect dust for various periods of time. And it just sort of seems to be one of those periods again, whether you hear the term loss on sale, and whether or not companies need to be looking at that. There were a lot of individuals that purchased homes over the past year that overpaid. There was a shortage in terms of inventory, so people were doing some crazy things like waiving appraisals and home inspections. And companies may be forced to work with those transferees that may need to sell their home over the next year or two and move. And so what are their options? What are they looking to do? And I think what we're hearing is there's no one size shoe fits all for all companies. I think different companies have different initiatives. They have different growth goals. And I think they're taking very different approaches. And I think right now, I was at an industry event last week, and I think the reigning theme I heard was people are kind of taking a wait and see approach. I don't think anybody's looking to necessarily try to bail people out that maybe made some poor decisions as it relates to buying. And so I think it's a learn, it's an educate, it's understand your options and take a wait and see approach and see what happens from an economic perspective as we move into 2023.
Okay, well, we've got some comments. We went to LinkedIn before, and men are saying global mobility is not a silo from the economics. The volume will be impacted. So Mena, I think, is going to be talking about maybe a modest decline at a guess from what she's saying there. In terms of the audience generally, we went out on LinkedIn. This is what we got. 12% were very optimistic and said there'll be a strong increase. 46% said a modest increase, which is where I think I put you, Mike, and Kyle, with your 3 to 5%. So those two together add up to about 58%. And then 42%, 31 said a modest decline, and 11% said a significant decline. So by and large, people are not as pessimistic as I feared they might be, given everything that's been happening with interest rates and cost of living and other impacts going on. So, which is, great news. Let's move on. We're going to move on to a different subject now, and let's talk about, Julia touched on it, but let's talk a bit about politics. And I'll start with you, if I may, Carl. We've got a situation where, in fact, just last night or yesterday, we got the latest result in terms of the US midterm elections. So they're pretty much over now. So tell us about what's the political situation in the US we've got the midterms behind us, and that's going to bed down now with some new faces, in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, we've got the run up to 2024 and the big fight up that's going to be going on, in just under 2 years' time. So tell us, what are your predictions? Where are we? The impact of the US midterms and the run up to 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll start by saying you and Pat actually covered it very, very well. You used the term gridlock, which is very apt. When we say gridlock here in the US, what we're describing pretty specifically in politics is a situation where the presidency, our Senate, and our House of Representatives are divided. So they're not all controlled by one party. In general, very broad terms, markets tend to like that. It means that they're not as likely to experience any really unforeseen large legislation that they can't plan for. In fact, as Pat mentioned, he's not expecting anything major on the tax front, which has to be on any company's list. One of the top 3 things they're always going to think about as a new 2-year election cycle here passes in the US. Am I about to be planning for an unexpected tax scenario that I didn't think I was going to have to deal with 2 years ago?
Okay,
So
that's interesting, because I know I always hear, markets like stability in government, and that I can understand. But you've actually gone one stage further, and you say it's not just stability they like; it's actually gridlock, when nobody can do anything, which I find that's opened my eyes, actually, because we see, or I look at the US as being in gridlock, and I think, oh, that's a bad thing. But what you're saying is that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of most companies, and certainly the financial markets, the markets, you can look back data well over 100 years now where we've had good, solid market data, particularly about equities and stocks. And you can see that on average, there is a marked difference when the control of our, overarching federal government is split. That performance in the markets is just simply much better. Companies are more optimistic. Investors are more optimistic, and things are, as you say, more stable and predictable than a situation, just being, frank and candid, where we were the last couple of years, where in this case, most recently, the Democrats did have control of all 3 chambers, both chambers and the presidency. And you just saw some incrementally more, broad in terms of the reach of some changes that they had into things such as the way they responded to the pandemic with, Pat mentioned it, but the direct payments to families for some childcare tax credits. That's just one example. In that case, it didn't necessarily directly impact companies, but that's the kind of thing that most folks would say maybe wouldn't have happened in a split situation. And so that split really does create that stability you're talking about. We're maybe a little bit more down on ourselves or pessimistic, and we call it this big bad word of gridlock. But it really is the stability piece that you point to that companies like and investors, frankly, find a lot of comfort in. It allows them to make some longer term decisions.
Okay. And of course, the other point is next year, we're going to start getting the primaries, and people are going to be jostling for position as to who is going to be on the final ballot paper for the presidential elections in 2024. And we've got 2 individuals, obviously, that we had last time, President Biden and President Trump, who both may want to be on the ballot paper, and also neither of whom are, dare I say it politely, spring chickens. They both got a few miles on the clock, I think. So the question I'd like to ask, and this is a personal thing, I'm not expecting a rocket view here, and I'd like to ask the audience as well, is who do you actually think, irrespective of your own personal preferences and leanings, I'm not trying to get into the politics of this, but who do you think will actually be on that final ballot paper? I'll give you four choices, okay? The first choice is it'll be Trump against somebody new. The second is, i.e. Biden won't be there. The second is the reverse. It'll be Biden against somebody new. The third is it'll be both of them. It'll be a rerun. It'll be Trump versus Biden. And the fourth is actually neither of them. It'll be new person against new person. So what do we think? Who's going to be you know, again, I'm not asking for political views. We don't do politics on this show. But who do you think actually is most likely to be on that final ballot paper?
Yeah, I'll cover it from the perspective of, again, like as recently as, you know, news in the past few days, what we're hearing here in the US. I think we're not quite connected enough to know with 100% certainty. But the last few days, there's been an increasing amount of quiet groundswell around President Biden indicating that he expects he's going to be on the ballot again in 24. He has not officially come out and said he will be the candidate, but a lot of ink now is being spilled about the quiet machinations he's doing in the background to get some fundraising going, get staffing going, you know, a lot of other things like that. In the US here, the sitting president is the leader of that political party. And so he'll sort of have to make the explicit decision, he and his team, to say, I'm not going to run and I'm willing to make room for someone else. Sort of the default, and in almost every single instance back in history, if the sitting president is eligible for a second term, they have almost without exception ran for that second term. So as I sit here today on, you know, a little bit before noon Detroit time, I feel like it's going to be Biden on the Democrat side. If you flip that to the Republicans, you know, President Trump has come out and declared his intention to be on the ballot. And you mentioned the election that happened last night. For folks that aren't familiar, there was an election we call a runoff election for a single seat in the Senate in the state of Georgia here. It was won by the Democrats last night. That gave them one more vote in the Senate. They technically already had control because of a tiebreaker vote from our vice president. It was split 50-50 before the vote. Now the Democrats have a slight 51-49 edge, which is why the Senate is in the control of the Democrats. Even as recently as during the election results last night, you could see the media sort of publicly questioning, where are the Republicans going to go here? Are enough folks going to line up behind President Trump into late 23 in primary season? Or are some of the other folks who, for example, you know, Ron DeSantis, the governor of the state of Florida, has been floated out there as one alternative or you know, maybe not antithesis certainly, but a different potential direction for the Republicans to go. There's beginning to be this open questioning, maybe because of some of the things that Pat mentioned on the Trump organization, or maybe not, it's tough to tell. But the reality is folks are sort of now finding it okay to say, you know, and they're saying it publicly, do we want President Trump to be our 2024 candidate or not? I think it's a bit more open on the Republican side. I'd kind of have to flip a coin right now. You're asking me personally. I'll give you an answer. I think at the moment it's Biden versus somebody else, but I don't think that I have any.
You're going Biden against somebody else. Mike, where are you on this? Who do you think?
Yeah, I've got to align with Kyle. I think at this point, minus the miles on the tread, I think that you referenced earlier, I would be leaning in that direction as well.
Okay. I'm going to shock you. I'm going to show you. I did a poll of this on LinkedIn. I'm going to show you the results. Now,
I see the comments don't agree with me.
Yeah, this shocked me, and you know, and people. To be fair, people responding from all over the world, so it wasn't just Americans. You know, in other words, voters who are responding. But here we had it. This is the poll. 73%, so nearly 3/4, said they thought it was going to be neither. So it was going to be new against new. 11% thought it was going to be Trump against somebody new. 13% thought it was going to be a rerun. Only 3%, which is actually the option you guys favored, only 3% thought it was going to be Biden against somebody else, which I find, I don't know, I found that quite surprising. So maybe people think that Biden won't stand for one reason or another, or his party will persuade him not to stand. And as we talked about, 2 years is a long way away. And you know, and who knows what life holds for any of us in 2 years' time. But anyway, I thought that was a very interesting poll that said, if we look at our friends on LinkedIn, nearly 3/4 said that the race would be between two complete strangers. I'm not sure, when was the last time that's happened in US politics, that it's been new against new?
The most recent time technically would have been when President Obama was done at the end of his second term. And it was Hillary Clinton versus now President Trump in 2016. I actually don't know off the top the last time that somebody could have ran for a second term and they did not.
That's what I meant, really. I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know, actually.
Hands down after one term.
You're quizzing me. I lose.
Let's move on. I want to move on to a different subject. I want to get back to this horrid subject of COVID. We've all lived through COVID, and I know it's still out there, and there's a lot of nasty bugs out there and what have you. But to a large extent, the world closed down and has reopened. There's been a bit of a bounce back, and we've changed our whole ways of working. But but we talk now about people having long COVID, about, if you like, the aftershocks in our own personal health of COVID. But what about financial long COVID? What are the aftershocks that we are seeing in the economy that have come out of the pandemic? And how long and how are we going to get past those?
Yeah.
I'll kick off on that one.
Sure. Yeah, I can start, Mike, and you hop in if you got something here. So I think the thing to know about COVID is the past 2 years, whether you look at certainly across the world, definitely not just here at the US. You look at both government and central bank spending, inflation, supply chains, furloughs, folks losing jobs, companies getting stronger, companies closing down and never coming back. It was, no matter how you put it, a very unusual time for any economy. It was an incredibly fast shock, even in places like China that tried to institute a zero COVID policy and seemed to have had very low deaths. It was an incredibly quick shock. What the markets are telling us right now is that combination of all those things I mentioned, spending, supply chain, and a lot of disruption in business, has kicked off a round of inflation. Regardless of exactly why you think it happened, it is certainly not yet over. Things like the war in Ukraine, I did not mention in what I just talked about, but that's just an example of something that follows on, really affects supply chains, affects the price of oil and things that go into the stuff that we all buy and want to do and consume in the world.
And once you get inflation in the system, it's quite hard to get it out because everybody wants pay rises to, cover the fact that their costs are going up, and you get more industrial action, and it gets, it's easier to start inflation than it is to stop it, I suppose.
Absolutely. There's you said it very well. There's pressure on folks, companies large and small who are paying wages, who are hearing their employees, or as we say at Rocket, their team members saying, groceries are expensive. I need to be able to make a living. And so there's this economy-wide, really worldwide pressure on companies to figure out where they can, how to pay more to retain their folks so that they don't have a hard choice to go look for enough money to put food on the table somewhere else and, to pay rent and do the things they want to do in life. So the market tells us that no matter how you slice it, the last 2 years and that inflation that was injected into everything that we're doing right now is going to take, depending upon who you ask, 12 to 24-ish months to fully work out of the system. But it's going to be vastly different depending upon economy, depending upon how much you were infected by or affected by COVID and the state of your economy today. I'll give you an example. Where you are, Brian, in the UK, and where I think Julia was today, this has been a much more top of mind thing where people have very explicitly talked about a recession already. Folks' their mortgages on their house are starting to reset at a materially higher rate. You flip that at home here in the US, we had an employment report last Friday that face value continues to say, while some other indicators don't, that at least in jobs, things are pretty strong. But we're starting to see those cracks on things like wage growth being a little higher than would allow us to bring inflation down. We had this upward pressure.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a point actually that maybe the audience may not know, but I appreciate it, is there is a fundamental difference, isn't there, between the mortgage market in the US and the mortgage market in most other countries around the world. Because in the US, when you take out a mortgage, the rate is normally fixed for whatever, 25, 30 years. Whereas in most other countries, when you take out a fixed rate mortgage, fixed means it's fixed typically for 5 years or so, yep. And then you renegotiate the mortgage at that later point. So when it comes to high interest rates, in most countries around the world, people are going to start seeing, if there's like halfway through their fixed period, then it's only a couple of years until they're paying much higher rates. Whereas in the US, people are much more protected because their mortgage rate is fixed for the duration of the mortgage.
That's exactly right. So in a situation like this here right now, we're not so much talking about payment shocks on the average mortgage, because overwhelmingly mortgages here are fixed for 30 years, as you mentioned. But we are talking a lot more and focusing on things, but here at Rocket, but really if you're an investor in US based assets, you're not looking at mortgage rates going up again. You're looking at things like credit card rates and credit card usage really bouncing up. The rates on short-term loans for things like cars, personal loans, things like that. Those are the rates. We don't talk about mortgage rates pressuring, but we talk about rents going up, and we talk about things like credit card being the thing that really pinch consumers here in the US.
So let's get into that on interest rates. Where do you see interest rates going over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think
have we got topped out, or is there more bad news to come, or good news if you're a saver?
Yeah, I think it's massively a question of how somebody in the market feels about inflation stopping. I think the market tells us today, and at Rocket, we kind of plan for all the eventualities. We try to hedge out as much risk as we can so that we do our best not to have to be forced to pick one outcome. And if we're wrong, it's a major problem for us. We kind of try to minimize the chance that whatever happens in the future impacts us financially. But from a rates perspective, everybody is asking what's happening in the world, whether it's supply chain or in Ukraine, anything else. The Fed raising rates. There's going to be another decision here in the US next week. The question you have to answer to say where rates are going to go is, how high do you think inflation is going to go, and when will it stop? Today, as we sit here, and I will say that I'm a tiny bit skeptical of this, but the way the world financial markets are lining up right now, the financial markets are, for example, saying to us that by mid next year, the US will be in at least a small recession. Doesn't mean it's a big one, but it does mean that we might be dealing with employment finally tailing down a little bit. We've seen a lot of headlines around layoffs in the tech industry, for example, right? That by itself isn't going to just tip us, but the idea is people are concerned enough that by mid next year, there's some semblance of a small recession, and that would make the Fed actually cut rates. That would imply that people think inflation is just about done at the top. And it's not that mortgages are going to go way back down to the, 1%, 2% range that we had overseas, and the 2s and 3s that we had here in the US, but that things will kind of come off a boil.
Okay, I'm going to move on. So what we're saying is we're predicting a mild recession in 23, and that in turn might mean the Fed starts to reduce interest rates as they get more worried about recession than they do about inflation. Mike, next question for you, and I'm just conscious of time here. Next question for you, how does that all impact property? So what do you think is going to happen to property values in 23?
From everything that we're seeing and reading, I think there's still the anticipation of modest increases. I don't think we're expecting to see the spike that we've dealt with over the last, obviously, couple of years during COVID and lack of inventory. But I do think, from everything that I'm seeing, I'm reading, and the conversations we're having, we're expecting them to stay stable or continue to slightly increase. I know some markets have started to come down a little bit. Across within the United States, they've started to stabilize, but for all intents and purposes, they're continuing to just have a small incremental gains, which I think we're anticipating continuing. I think a lot, again, just will fall back based on inventory and what's out there. I think you have a lot of people that are not necessarily looking to move because of the rates they have been able to secure over the last, several of years. And I think that's going to play a big impact on what happens moving forward.
And what do you think the impact is going to be then on things like mortgage assistance programs and helping people move either domestically or internationally?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we were expecting, initially when we started having these conversations with partners, I think we were under the impression or thinking that there may be more assistance that was going to be provided by corporations because of the talent issues. I think I'm starting to pivot a little bit back the other way. I think, again, from the feedback we're getting, people definitely want to understand the options, but depending upon these programs, some of them come at a significant cost to a corporation at a time when companies are looking to control their costs. And so I think, it's going to be interesting to see what companies do. I think it's going to be based very much on their individual objectives and what they're looking to accomplish. I think some people are going to draw a hard line in the sand and not do anything. And I think there are other corporations that are more focused on the experience of that transferee, the need for that talent, that are going to be willing to provide those types of mortgage assistance. I think at that point, it's which is the right program. And there's sort of 4 different key types within the mortgage space. I would recommend to anybody here to definitely talk with your preferred mortgage lenders and understand what those options are, because they all bear a different cost back to your company, and identify what are you looking to achieve to then figure out which program is right for you. And I think, we're all looking at cost models for 23. Mobility managers are trying to figure out their budgets. These are programs that, if you decide to implement them, are going to impact your budget, and you're going to need to have that in your forecast and discuss those with your different business units. So again, I think we're doing and seeing a lot of education right now. I don't think we're seeing a lot of people necessarily making changes, but there's a lot of benchmarking going on at this point.
And we're coming to the last few minutes of the show, so I want to go for just one quick fire round for you both, and I'm really looking for a one-word answer to this one, and that's this. It's a hard one, okay? Which do you think will be the best performing currency of 2023? And I'm going to give you 4 choices, okay? Dollar, euro, pound, or yen.
I know Kyle's got a much better perspective on this than me, but I would say the dollar.
If you believe the market at the moment today, it's the euro.
Okay, so we got the market saying the euro, and we've got the dollar. Obviously, the great thing about these things is nobody ever knows, but we'll come back. We've got this recorded now, and we'll come back and
Great.
in a year's time. We did actually ask the audience earlier, and just to let you know, in terms of our audience poll, is that they said 59% said the dollar would be the best performing currency, 18% said the euro, 12% said the pound, and 11% said the yen. So interesting to see. I mean, the audience seemed to be with you, Mike, but Kyle, you're the guy in capital markets, so we'll find out. Menno there is saying the dollar too. So anyway, we're getting towards the end of our show. What I do want to do is I want to bring on our wonderful resident experts, bring on Julia and Pat, and bring on Tally too. And Pat, was Pat? No, we haven't got Pat. He hasn't come. Hang on. Sorry, Pat. We'll bring you on.
I'm here.
Okay, the team is back. So, Pat, from your perspective, I mean, move volumes. I mean, obviously you do a huge amount of advice in this area. Do you think it's going to be up or down next year, and modestly or significantly?
Modestly up is what I would predict.
Okay,
just based on my intuition, nothing based on metrics, really.
That's what we've all got at the end of the day. You can do whatever metrics, but it's the future. Nobody knows what the future holds. Julia, from your perspective, obviously you see an awful lot of visas and work permits in your everyday life. What do you think volumes are going to be like, not just for your company, but for the industry as a whole?
I think up.
Okay,
Definitely.
So everybody, we're ending. Well, we're not ending the year. We've got another episode next week, but we're entering December, and we're entering the holiday season on a slightly more note that I thought we were going to come out, which is great. So everybody, we are back next week, and next week is the big show. It's the big reveal. Make sure that date is in your diary. It's the same time next week, December the 14th, and we're going to be revealing who are the top 100 innovators in global mobility. Thank you to everybody who's been on the show today, to Kyle, to Mike, to Julia, to Pat, and as ever to Tally, who works all the buttons behind the scenes. And thank you to everybody out there in the audience, and we will see you again this time next week. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks all.